Hey guys, welcome back to another video. So I recently came across an article that is about a month old. I missed it initially. The article was on freight waves written by Adam Wingfield, who provides a lot of interesting insight into trucking and the market. Now, as many of you know, my roots on this channel revolve around talking about supply and demand, the market, what is going on, how is the economy influencing the rates we see on the load boards. And today I really want to talk about this article because it answers a very important question that I think everyone has thought of at one point or another. Is what is happening with capacity right now enough to flip the market? So let's chat about it. Ready? Let's go. Now, I'm going to admit that as of late, I have been focusing more on keeping you guys updated with the news, and the news revolve around capacity and the different ways capacity is leaving this industry. And of course, understandably, this has created a lot of heated discussions in the comment section as well as everywhere else. A lot of opinions, a lot of disagreements, and a lot of anger from all sides. But let's put all of that aside for this video at least and talk about, is this actually making any sizable dent in the market? Now, Mr. Wingfield stated the following: capacity exits happen fast because they're driven by emotion, fear, frustration, debt pressure, and survival instincts. Demand doesn't work like that. Demand is structural. Now, in my previous video where I talked about volumes and capacity, I did mention a couple of ways that we can see rates go up. Number one, if capacity stays the same but volumes increase, it creates a situation where there are more loads than trucks, therefore rates increase. Number two, if capacity decreases and volumes stay the same, it again creates a situation where there are more loads than trucks, and therefore the rates increase. But if capacity is leaving, but at the same time volumes are decreasing at a faster rate, we are in a situation where rates actually remain depressed and might even go lower simply because that supply and demand balance is not there. There is more supply of trucks than there is demand, regardless of the fact that capacity is leaving. If volumes are decreasing faster than capacity is, yeah, we're in basically the same situation we have been in for the last three years. Yeah, almost 4. Now, I completely stand by these statements. However, when I was making these statements, I completely forgot about something that I already knew in the back of my mind, but somehow it just escaped me. What else can happen if capacity is exiting, right, in the data, but demand stays flat? According to freight waves, this would mean that there would be a long-term pain for the spot market. But how? So again, something that I was aware of, but things escape you sometimes. You know how I always talk about how a driver shortage has never existed, past, present, or future, arguably? The reason I say this is because of those incognito carriers, or incognito capacity, as I like to call it. There are folks who do not show up in the data. A lot of you guys are incognito capacity, as I would call it, because this is a situation where someone who used to be actively in the trucking industry has a truck, maybe a trailer, both of which are paid off, but that equipment is parked. This person can enter the market at any time, but chooses not to simply because the market and the rates are abysmal at the moment. But the moment the market flips, those carriers, those truckers, that capacity can easily enter back into the market, those incognito carriers. All right, so now considering all of this, let's go through the reasons why in the article on freight waves, it states that even if capacity exits but volumes stay flat, we are not to expect a booming market. The first scenario was named the rate tease by Mr. Wingfield, and basically it states the following. When all of a sudden capacity starts dropping, there is a momentary uptick in the rates. And when that happens, some of those incognito carriers, that incognito capacity, takes it as a sign that the market is turning and comes back into the market. This, of course, means that capacity might have decreased in this area, but increased in this area. So the result is that the rates don't really change, or that uptick is very short lived. To top it off, larger fleets might start redeploying previously parked equipment. So according to this article, because the demand hasn't actually improved, demand meaning the volume, the amount of freight available in the market, the total amount of freight in the system hasn't grown. It's the same pie, just sliced thinner. With more trucks once again fighting for the same amount of freight, the brief freight lift collapses and we're right back where we started. All right, scenario number 2 is called big fleets take the slack before small carriers can benefit. And I'm going to quote this whole thing because I can't say it any better. When small carriers exit the market, it's easy to assume that tightening capacity will finally create breathing room for the spot market. But that's not what happens. The moment those trucks disappear, the larger carriers move fast. They swoop in to capture mini bids, lock down contract freight, absorb the volumes once handled by defunct carriers, and negotiate long-term deals. By the time spot carriers start to feel like the market is tightening, the large asset carriers have already stepped in and absorbed a big portion of oxygen in the room. All right, scenario number 3 is called returning capacity undercuts the market. And this one is very interesting. Now, we know that there are situations where a carrier might shut down, but then later on will re-enter the trucking market because of financial pressure. And when there is financial pressure, unfortunately, it is human nature to try and find the fastest fix. So what people end up doing in this situation is focusing more on cash flow than actual business finances, right? So they focus on cash flow and book loads that get them that cash flow regardless of whether those rates actually cover the operational costs. Again, when these carriers who are, for lack of a better word, financially desperate re-enter the market, they're more likely to book lower rates just to haul something in order to save or preserve that cash flow, and that results in cheaper rates if there is a big portion of the market, of the capacity that is agreeing to those cheaper rates. Scenario number 4 is called the freight desert problem, and it's pretty self-explanatory. So as an example, let's take a beautiful state like Montana. It is a gorgeous state with the most wonderful people I have ever met, but it's literally a desert when it comes to the availability of freight. Removing capacity from states like Montana, where there are no loads, doesn't magically increase the number of shippers or the number of freight that is available in the market. Now, of course, Montana is just being used as an example here, but even if we take the whole US, and let's say that the load volumes are just not there, removing that capacity is not going to budge the market if there is nothing to haul. It just means that a dead market in terms of demand is also now a dead market in terms of supply, but this does not affect anything to do with rates. So of course the question is volumes. Volumes need to increase and volumes need to get stronger in order for us to see a true change in the market, not just for a week, right, but for the long term. Now, as FreightWave states, the freight market only recovers for the long haul when the freight actually needs to move, not simply when trucks leave the road. Capacity can tighten the market for a moment, but without real freight volume behind it, nothing meaningful sticks. The only time the spot market genuinely strengthens is when the broader economy creates enough freight to shift the balance. So what do you have to keep an eye on? Do you still need to keep an eye on capacity? Of course, because it's still part of the supply and demand formula, right? Any change in capacity is still going to have an effect on the market. So yes, continue keeping an eye on the number of MCs that are lost versus gained. Keep an eye on the current news that affect capacity, but we also need to keep an eye on things that will affect the volume in the market. For example, are retailers beginning to restock their inventories or are inventories being reduced? That is going to directly influence the amount of volume in the market. Number 2, what is happening with the housing market? And FreightWaves mentioned that housing and construction, of course, they're very, very tightly related to flatbed operations, but also to dry van operations, because if housing starts picking back up, then those building materials will have to start getting moved. That increases the volume. What is happening with manufacturing? That influences all types of freight. And number four is, of course, imports. As Adam Wingfield stated, imports are a big way that volumes increase or decrease. Are more containers moving through the ports, or are there less containers moving through the ports? Anyway, guys, I just wanted to make this video to give a little bit more clarity. We need to focus on volumes. Of course, capacity is still equally important. Now, what we're seeing right now, and I was just posting on X about it today, is I see more and more posts of brokers panicking about the lack of capacity. And it's not just in posts. I started getting more and more emails. I don't know if you get them too. You know how brokers send you a load list of available freight? Usually the subject line will say either the pickup and delivery locations, the lane information, or it will just say available loads this week or just available loads. I started getting emails that are, of course, sent out to everyone with just the rate. And the last one I got, it was $2.62 per mile for a long haul load. It was the rate in the subject line, which means that the brokers are trying to pique the interest of carriers. They are having a harder time. However, there is something that I want to kind of clarify. Right now, it is very difficult to say, is this because of the crackdowns that are happening all over, or is it more because we are coming up on the big holidays? It's also the end of the year. Capacity usually decreases during this time. Plus, we have the weather, right? There are also folks who stay in the market during the holidays, but they minimize where they are willing to go because of the weather. So there are a lot of questions of why this is happening. Some argue this has not happened in the last 3 years. And as an open deck carrier, I can say that I'm not seeing as much of a positive change in the market simply because this time is not the best time for open decks. Usually flatbed stub decks are closely tied to construction, and construction usually slows down in the colder months because of the elements. Anyway, guys, wishing you all a beautiful weekend. Stay safe, stay healthy, and keep learning. See you in the next video.